Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Welcome to another episode of Enlightenment and Understanding with your host, Jacob Strong. I know it's been a few weeks since I made a show, about 2 weeks actually, since I made a show, and just kind of been busy and haven't really known what to say. I've just haven't really been feeling my 5D for the past few weeks. But not today. Boy, I'm on a roll today. So thank you all for tuning in, and thank you for all the new listeners that have decided to join me today, and really appreciate you all for coming. So again, so that most of you have understanding as to what I'm referencing and what I'm talking about, you'd really have to listen to all my shows to get caught up. Because obviously, to recap, it would be rather extensive, but I was wrongfully convicted and sentenced to federal prison for a term of 36 months. And though I continue to fight the wrongful conviction, I'm now talking about um, my experience with what the courts did to me and what they are doing to me, and really tried to gain an understanding as to what was really going on with society today and how we are in this predicament that we're in. So, a very short recap. I'm an empath. I grew up with a very abusive dad, and my psychologist, when I was 20 years old, told me he was not worried about me becoming my dad, but was worried I would marry my dad. And that's exactly what I did. I ended up marrying a very narcissistic, abusive woman who moved out of my house a month after we got married because God told her to marry her ex-husband and not me. So needless to say, um, I had to protect my son from this abuser. So I took him and took off with him, and of course the feds came and got me, and yeah, sent me to prison for 3 years. So anyway, before that, I didn't have much of an education. Eighth grade education is what I had, and however, I have a very good memory, and definitely intellectual, maybe even slightly autistic. Um, but anyway, um, haven't been diagnosed as any of those things other than an empath because of my childhood. So, so while I was in prison, I took the opportunity and took the time to learn about human psychology, to learn about what makes people tick and what makes society, turn over, um, what makes society, develop. And of course, once I learned from the human psychology aspect of it, I was amazed at what I had learned. What I'd learned about how really abusive my ex was, which I didn't even realize to the extent, even when I was with her, till I looked at it objectively instead of subjectively, and so then that's when I realized um, that I needed to make this show. So I decided to make this show. Um, so to recap, not to recap, but to discuss what I went through in federal prison. As part of the requirements, you have to get a GED while you're in federal prison. So of course I got my GED while I was in federal prison. Mind you, before that I was homeschooled a lot of my life up to about eighth grade. However, interestingly, I passed my GED exam with flying colors, with the highest well, I don't know about the highest, but definitely, some of the higher test scores and the um, at the prison that I was at. Anyway, and so one of the things I thought was very interesting is when I had to get my GED and they discussed political and politics, they always referenced movies and TV shows to explain political views. And I thought about that when I was taking the test, and I was like, life is not a movie. Why are we living through a movie? But then I realized a movie can be just a reenactment of everyday events from a point of view, from a specific person's point of view. And um, so it does make sense that politics would reference, like crime shows or psychology thrillers to convey what they are trying to say. And of course, the problem with that is you get a bunch of people that can watch a show or hear something and immediately subjectively take that side based on a gender perspective or based on a personal experience or personal connection or whatever. And so they'll automatically be biased from one side instead of looking at the whole picture. Again, because I'm an empath and because my ex-wife is so abusive and verbally abusive and emotionally abusive and violent, I started to become a dark empath with her, which is not good at all because then you start returning that darkness for darkness. But of course, the courts and her own attorney, rather than getting to the truth, rather than getting to the bottom of it, they just continue on you know, with trying to eliminate any psychological um, avenue. I've asked that my ex take a psych eval because, again, she moved out of my house based on a delusional voice in her head that told her um, to that she wasn't to have, sex or relations with me because God had told her to marry her ex-husband. Conveniently, of course, this was a month after we got married. So again, she uses that as a scapegoat, but ultimately she's a narcissist. It was just about her the whole time. She was in it for one purpose, to get money, to get child support, to get her life set up by using a child. And then, of course, using, the marriage to validate that. So, what we're going to reference today, to give you an example of where we are at today in society, is we're going to talk about the movie Red Dragon. Now, Red Dragon is a precursor to Silence of the Lambs, and I've referenced Silence of the Lambs before because these individuals are extremely manipulative. Anthony Hopkins plays an extremely manipulative, extremely cunning and sharp psychologist who has a, quote, dark side to him, right? So, The Red Dragon was, of course, made after Silence of the Lambs, but it showed how he got arrested, right, and how he ended up in prison and who caught him and that sort of stuff. And one of the things at the very end of the movie is he's writing a letter to the retired FBI agent. He conveys to him that we live in primitive times. I'm going to say verbatim what he said and then I'm going to add to, correct, and insert a point of view so that y'all can understand what I'm saying. So he says, we live in primitive times. We're neither savage nor wise. Half measures are the curse of it. A rational society would kill or put people like him to use. There's a few words in there that I don't agree with. One of them is he says a rational society would kill or put him to use. Why does it have to be rational? What does rational mean, and what does that convey? Well, rational just says let's just be, rational. Let's not overreact. Let's not do anything too eccentric. In today's society, to when I was sentenced to federal prison, I asked for the death penalty to try and get my point across. If I'm such a horrible person for saving my son from such a violent, emotionally abusive woman, then why not make a show of it? Make a stand against, quote, people like me, end quote. And, of course, the judge knew that legally he couldn't sentence me to that, so instead he sentenced me to the max sentence, which was 36 months. So again, a rational person would say, well, we don't necessarily need to execute someone, right? Because they're not thinking of one extreme or the other. But why do we have to label it as an extreme to execute someone, as opposed to, sending them to a max sentence, say 36 months? Um, so anyway, so the truth is any society that chooses light over darkness, understanding over delusion, wisdom over ignorance, is not a rational society. They're really not. But rather, they're in pursuit of the true meaning of light, of life, excuse me, and light over darkness, enlightenment, and true progress. Because the bottom line is just like Hannibal Lecter in The Red Dragon, he would have welcomed the death penalty, and that's the the point that they're trying to convey with that letter that he wrote. He would have welcomed the death penalty, or he would have welcomed being put to use. He already knew that he had desires or cravings that were abnormal, like he liked to eat people, right? So he already was aware of that. Um, and so that's why he spoke neutral, or he wrote in his letter a neutral conveyance what um, of what it was, of what he believed was truth and justice, and that was, hey, they should either execute me or they should, put me to use. And so yeah, so the term rational in that context not really a good is not really a good term for that, because it's not that a society that seeks truth and enlightenment and wisdom is rational, but instead they are in pursuit of true progress. So the other thing that he stated was that we lived in primitive times, and primitive times are. Oh, I got someone writing me a note here. Just a second. All right. So another thing that he said, of course, at the beginning of that letter, he said that primitive times, that we lived in primitive times. But how can you say that we live in primitive times when during the Dark Ages they executed people without understanding? Um, so again, so there's, you know, as a society, we keep going from one extreme to the other where we don't listen, where we don't seek understanding, and then, you know, we resort to, you know, mass executions, the witch hunts, and all of that, without understanding, you know, wait a minute, why are these quote unquote, you know, witch people, why are they doing what they are doing? Let's just execute them because they believe in a different belief system. And so I can't say that it is primitive times that we live in either, but rather it is um, a time when we have all of the information there, but we don't want to turn on the light. Because how do you kill darkness? You turn on a light, right? That's how you would kill darkness, is to simply turn on a light. And so we as a society, particularly in this country, don't want to turn that light on, because once we turn that light on, then we will see what is also in that darkness. So from the government standpoint, they don't want to see what's in the darkness, um, because then they will have to address it. They will have to um, fix it, and they will have to acknowledge it, and they will have to admit that they are wrong on so many occasions and on so much. And so they don't. So we don't live in primitive times. We live in a time of it's better to be ignorant than to seek out the truth, even though we have all this truth um, everywhere that we can find, that we can tap into. And I don't mean just Google, I don't mean the internet. I mean truth as in, you know, if you tap into that energy source, into that fifth dimension, you know what is right and what is wrong. You can feel it, you can sense it, you can taste it, you can smell it, you can hear it. You know, one of the interesting things that I did some studying on this last week was on the Chinese calendar this year. It's the year of the snake, and it occurs every 6 years on the 12th year, or every 12 years on the 6th year, something like that. Anyways, so it's been a while since we've had a snake. Um, but in Kabbalistic Judaism, as well as Chinese tradition, the snake is honored. It is a good creature. It is a good omen for an individual to follow after. And I think that it's interesting because much of society today, I'm not going to say what religion, but there is a religion that references the serpent, right? And they talk about it as being bad. Um, but in Judaism, again, that quote serpent is not bad, but rather the snake has no ears. So because it has no ears, it cannot hear gossip. And so it doesn't respond to gossip. Instead, it feels the vibrations of the earth. It feels what the earth is going through, and it knows. And so with that being said, um, I'm just seeing here who. who's following me, thank you for joining me, sir. Yeah. So anyway, so because it's the year of the snake, um, and particularly in this country, it's viewed as something that's bad, but it's not. It's not bad. Rather, it senses those ground vibrations. It's connected with the earth, and so it knows truth and justice. And um, this gentleman is messaging me just a second here. So yeah, sorry about that. I can't really type and think at the same time, so it kind of gets distracting after a while. But but anyway, so back to society today and what the government has done, particularly in this country, is they've tried to eliminate understanding and um, and so you can sorry about that. I need to just stop looking at the computer screen because I keep getting distracted with all these messages. But anyway, so back to what we were saying as far as about society today and the government's ignorance to keep themselves in the blind, rather than um, basically practicing what they preach, right? Because again, when I was getting my GED, and they referenced um, the movies and the political aspect of it, I found I found it very interesting that they referenced them, but then they don't even. In a lot of law school, they reference a lot of movies as well, but um, they don't even seek any wisdom for themselves. They don't hire the psychologist or anyone else to gain understanding as to why a person is either acting or reacting in a specific manner. Any psychologist that has spoken with me has, noted that that I am an empath, but I've also noted the reaction to what I was going through. And so it is aware and it is information that is, that they can know, but the government just chose not to acknowledge it, but rather focus on being ignorant and pursuing their own agenda, in my case. So, at any rate, so that's the show that I decided to discuss today. And sorry about being a little scattered today. I had a lot of people on my show as well as logging in, trying to speak with me. So I appreciate you all for logging in and listening. And I encourage you to listen to the rest of my episodes so that you can gain an understanding of what I've been through and how I have gotten here today. And please like and follow and share. I would really appreciate it. And yeah, y'all have a good day and probably talk to you later or maybe tomorrow. So thank you for joining me. Have a good day.